Welcome back to Feedback Loop. I'm Jeremy,
I'm Joey.
and we're talking about music as is tradition on the show. That's what we do
Yeah,
every week.
every
This
single
week,
week.
this week we're talking about J. Cole's album "For Your Eyez Only." It's a hip hop album, kind of leeching off of the previous week we talked about Tyler the Creator's Igor, and it jumped out to me as a necessary follow up because it has a good feel to it. It has I don't want to say it has a similar feel, but I think it gave me insight into what kind of hip hop you like, and hopefully I wasn't far off the mark. In addition to that, I chose this album because, or I guess I should say, I put this album on the list to begin with because it's. I don't want to say it's super nostalgic because it's not, but it feels good. I really enjoy this album. Our friend Levi, which we've mentioned several times, had tried to get me to listen to J. Cole back when we were working at the pizza place, off and on, and I didn't really like it. But years later, so this was, I guess, man, it had to have been like 4 years ago. It was probably pretty recently after this album came out. Um, I went over to his house late at night, which I usually do. We hang out late at night, but we went to McDonald's or something, and he put this album on, and I was hooked. I just it instantly clicked, and I fell in love with it. And it's kind of been in my rotation since then, and I listen to it pretty much every time I drive back from a distant concert. It's just kind of become a tradition at this point to put this album on because it's a good night driving album in my opinion.
Well, shit, man, you should have told me that back whenever we were driving home from that concert last year, and we
I
wouldn't
didn't
have.
even I didn't even think about it honestly.
We listened to the same Mastodon album like 17 times, and it was
Hey,
it was just ridiculous.
it's okay, man. Mastodon's great. Interestingly enough, that was exactly 1 year ago today. I think that we
Was
went
it?
and saw System of a Down.
I believe it. Yeah, we did see System of a Down. That's what happened.
Anyways, that's not the topic of this podcast.
Yeah,
We're gonna get right into it. The album art for this album, it's got like a torn look to it, like a scrapbook kind of thing, where like an image, like a photo has been taped in and like torn out of a magazine and then placed somewhere else. But the photograph looks like the back of J. Cole's head. It's black and white, and there's a little kid sitting next to him, standing next to him, I should say. Not a whole lot to discuss, in my
yeah.
opinion. Anything just jump out to you?
I'm just given the subject matter of the album, like I feel like the whole actual picture looking vibe kind of means something. I just haven't put
Yeah,
it all together yet.
there's a lot to take in from this album.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly I just listened to it right before we got on here, the whole thing,
Yeah, it's a
and
long album.
there was still stuff that I was like just getting, and
Yeah,
I mean, it's not only is it, I mean, it's decently long, but it's also extremely dense. As
yes,
as with
as
a lot
rap
of like,
is.
yeah, rap, like especially rap in this, I guess, style. I don't
Yeah,
know, where there's,
there's a lot of lyrics.
there's a lot of lyrics. They all mean a lot, and you have to kind of piece it all together.
Right. It's 10 songs, 44 minutes, which isn't. It's not super long, like you said, but it's longer than a lot of them that we've been doing.
Yeah,
We've done a lot of like half-hour albums, and this is 15 minutes longer, which is, it's a few tracks longer, but it's actually 10 tracks, so it's not more tracks, it's just longer tracks on average, I suppose.
yeah,
The first of which is "For Whom the Bell Tolls." It's actually one of the shorter tracks, but it's a good intro. It's got some like nice vibraphones going on and some muted trumpets.
oh yeah,
It's very jazzy, which I enjoy, and that comes through a couple of times in the album. There's like some vocal samples and some ahs and some strings, and it's good.
dude,
I love it.
I like his voice on this album. Like honestly, because before listening to this album, the only thing I've ever heard by J. Cole was that workout song. I actually looked up the name for it because I only ever heard
Yeah,
it on the radio. But
I don't think I've heard that song, so that
it's
goes to show you how much of a J. Cole fan I am in general.
it is very much like what you would have heard on the radio in like 2012, 2013, where it's just like a club song or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I
that,
think that's probably why I didn't get into J. Cole back in the day when Levi was trying to get me into him. Is
yeah,
that I'm not a fan of that kind of music in general.
I'm not either. Like I listen to, I mean, this is gonna be longer than it should be for me to talk about it, but I like that music. It has its place, but it's not. I'll listen to it when it comes on the radio, especially if there were like people with me, and it's like, yeah, we can all have
Yeah,
a good time listening to this song right now.
sure.
But if I'm trying to listen to music to listen to it, I would not put on that. I would put on this because like this is not what I
Yeah.
was expecting at all.
So what
His,
you're saying is that you really enjoy this album.
you know what? I was gonna try to keep it to the end, but I already told you. Yes,
I'm glad I hit the mark on that.
I do
Uh,
really like this album.
yeah, he sings a bit throughout this album, and I agree. I like his singing voice as well as his rapping voice. There's not a huge difference in his singing voice and rapping voice, for the most part, anyway. But it's good.
Yeah, and I like that it starts off kind of simple. I mean,
Yeah,
I one thing that I'm gonna go ahead and say it. You're gonna hear me talk about it on almost every track. Is that the music on this album is just,
it's good.
it's awesome. It is just great. Like you said, it's great night driving music. Like I,
It's it's got a good groove.
yeah, I want to go outside, drive around for an hour, and finish this whole album.
Yeah, it's good. Lyrically, this track, it's pretty clearly, in my opinion, talking about depression. The song is "For Whom the Bell Tolls," which is generally referring to death, the tolling of bells.
Yeah,
And he talks about feeling low, and he even at some point asks if he wants to die. Like he's asking himself. He doesn't know if he wants to die or not, but the fact that it's crossing his mind is scaring him a
yeah,
little bit. Which I think it's kind of an interesting start to an album when you're kind of talking about the end of someone's life. Maybe it's just kind of a weird irony that I picked up on, but
yeah. And I mean, given kind of the whole story arc of this album, I think it fits that it's starting off
yeah,
in this place. But we'll
yeah,
get into
it's
that.
kind of setting the context and scene, I suppose, for the story that's about to unfold.
Yeah, there's that song that leads directly into Immortal, which is us. It's weird. The song talking about death leads into a song called Immortal,
Yeah,
but I don't know. This song to me, like the beat, awesome. Of course, it's a
yeah,
given.
it's a much more traditional hip hop, whereas like the intro for "Whom the Bell Tolls" was very like jazzy, and there was a lot of like trumpets and stuff. There wasn't like a huge like big kick that's in a lot of like traditional rap, I should say.
Yeah, it's. I like this I guess subject matter of it because he opens up, of course, talking about like it's a very for whom the bell tolls. It's death themed. Then it goes
Right,
into a song talking about Immortal, where he's talking about you can live on through your actions
right,
rather than like you're gonna die, and especially where he's talking about growing up around like gangs and growing like on the streets and what like stuff like that stuff. And you're gonna hear me I'm gonna go ahead and put a disclaimer. I have not had a hard life at all.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
like,
I think we both kind of covered that. We are privileged for
yeah.
sure.
And so whenever you hear me say, "Oh yeah, it's the streets, it's the hood," like I'm trying to put myself in these shoes, and it's like there's a line in this song that like immediately blew me away whenever I heard it, and I know for some people they're gonna be like, "What?" Like, of course, like
You
that's
sheltered
yeah,
person.
that's life. But it's like the lyric was, it's talking about, of course, people setting all these kids in like in this neighborhood, like around all this violence and gang violence and stuff. Of course, the old thing like, well, you either the only way you can make it out is you either sell drugs, rap, or play basketball, and like that's
Yeah,
ingrained in them. And the line was, "It's that sort of thinking that keeps us chained at the bottom or hanged. The strangest fruit you've ever seen, ripe with pain." Like
yeah,
instantly, it's just like the imagery of racism, the imagery of people, and like systematically keeping all of these people down and just
Right.
keeping them in this boiling pot of
Yeah.
just, and it's, I don't know, it was just like, I am so far outside of anything that I have ever experienced in my life, but holy, like, this is gonna be pretty dark probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good. We actually talked about this when we were playing video games,
Mm-hmm.
referring to another rap album. We were talking about Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. And I said that I couldn't really get a connection with that album because it's so far out of my experience and my background, right?
Yeah.
So I enjoy it lyrically. I think it's great to discuss because it needs to be fucking discussed because racism's fucking horrible, and the fact that it's still happening to the extent that it is, it's not great. It's fucking awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interestingly, this might change your perspective on the album. This song is from somebody else's perspective, and
See,
and
okay.
a lot of the album is, and I feel like you kind of pick up hints on it, but it's from the perspective of someone that J. Cole knew, and I know you had that thought at least by the end of the album specifically,
Yeah.
but interestingly enough, in the chorus of the song, he says "Forward the plot 1745," and it seems kind of like my initial thoughts, and I didn't actually know this until getting into the lyrics for this album. My initial thoughts is that it was just some like random code number, like people rep their zip codes and stuff like
Mhm.
that, or maybe it was an address or something. But I saw a theory online, and maybe this is just a conspiracy theory, but it's one I choose to believe.
Oh man.
That sample, we're putting on our tinfoil caps here.
Oh
The
yeah.
When he first says that line, it's 53 seconds into the track. He
Mhm.
says forward the plot 1745. If you add 17 minutes and 45 seconds to that time, you end up at about the 4 minute and 10 second mark in the track Change,
Oh god. Okay.
which is where you hear the eulogy begin of a James McMillan Jr.,
I
which is
believe it.
the name of this character. It's not the actual name. He changed the name to James McMillan Jr. for
Yeah.
privacy reasons. But a lot of this album is from the perspective of this character.
I,
So
I want to believe I
I know,
want to,
right?
because
It feels right.
yeah. Well, I mean, I knew it was a lot of the album was written from the perspective of somebody named James,
Yeah,
because it was in Changes, right? I and this is something I figured out on my maybe like second or third listen, is I heard him say something like he was he got shot and I had to go home, and I saw it on the news the next day. It was my friend James. He was only 22,
yeah,
or like something along those lines. It wasn't. He obviously said it way better than I just said it.
right. We're not rappers.
Yeah, like, but I didn't, because the first time I was listening to it, the whole album, I just thought, oh, this is all from his perspective, until I heard the last track, and I was like, maybe just this last one is like,
Yeah,
it's
the
dedicated
last
to
track
somebody.
really blows it open.
Yeah, but I'm
But
getting ahead of myself. So
yeah, we'll get there. Before we do, before we move on from this track, even lyrically, like you said, it's about quote unquote, I don't want to say traditional because that's bad, but it's about someone selling drugs and thinking that they'll be a legend and live on and stuff like that. And then the last verse, like you said, is kind of from J. Cole's perspective in my mind, how he feels like that there's this oppression and he feels like he won't make a difference unless he dies young and successful, which
yeah,
is kind of a common theme in music. People that die when they're in their prime tend to blow up and become legends. uh,
yeah,
Strangely, Levi is super into that stuff, and he's aware of it, so he's not just doing it like absentmindedly. He like seeks out musicians that have died in their prime and latches
yeah.
onto them.
Well, I mean, it's that lost potential. I think
Yeah,
personally, it's like, oh, you see somebody like Kurt Cobain or Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin,
right.
or somebody in the 27 Club, and you're like, oh, what could they have been? But
Right.
that's for another. That's for another. I could
That's its
also
own
go into that.
episode.
Yeah.
Anyways, the next track number 3, is Deja Vu. We get some more vocal samples floating around in the back, which I enjoy. I'm sure we've mentioned. Um, it's got another kind of big kick and crisp snap snare kind of thing going on with the beat, which it lends itself to rap, and I
Yeah.
like it a lot. But it does in the bridge kind of break that and get some like more of that funky groovy bass that's been happening. Lyrically, it's another track from James' perspective. It's about him meeting the perfect girl for him despite the fact that she's taken, and he kind of like it's kind of weird and jumbled, I think, in that the chorus of it, which is repeated as he's going through this, seems to imply that he knows it's probably not going to work out because she's focused on smaller things and he wants more.
Yeah. Well, see, okay. So the way I interpreted it is I did think the way that they did the chorus was a little confusing because it seemed out of the timeline with the verses. Like it was
Right.
going back to a certain focal point of him being in a club, and it's just talking about the general thought of shoot your shot now because you're not gonna know when you get the chance. Like man up and do it, which is the very thought of man up and do it is a theme that I kind of think runs throughout this album. The thought of being a man in like this environment of like
Yes.
doing the like acting tough, acting like not showing your emotion, and but that it's I just think that's a theme that I see in it. So
It
I think
is 100% throughout this album.
okay,
Is that, or at least from what I got out of it, a lot of these tracks are from James' perspective, and more specifically, James trying to be real, quote unquote.
yeah,
And what that means to James, and then at the end, you kind of we'll get to it at the end. There's
yeah,
a kind of change in that,
yeah,
in the last track.
and but yeah, it's kind of like that's what I got, and he's realizing the whole she's going after small things, he's looking big picture. I thought that was more he was talking about like saying that's a reason she should pick him over this other guy is that guy was going for small things, he's going
That could
for
be as well, for
but
sure.
that's my only qualm with your dissection of that.
We're gonna fight after this is over. I'm
Yeah.
gonna lay into you. We're gonna scream. We'll have makeup sex later. It'll be great.
The circle of life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this song it wasn't necessarily my favorite. It's like it's not a bad track, but it's
I
kind
agree.
of it was to me. I tend to like I'm doing air quotes deeper songs,
Yeah.
and this wasn't that for me. So
Right. And I think in the context of this album, it makes sense because it's not from J. Cole's perspective. It's from the perspective of someone that is selling drugs. They're trying to be cool. They're trying to fit in with
yeah,
the whole like mentality of where they came from.
but yeah. So speaking of mentality, next song.
Take the bait. I said it there. You gotta lean into it.
Oh man, you meant to do it. Okay, well the next song is Full Mentality, and
Yep.
that's so forced segue. But man, so this is another case where I just love the music on it. Like it's very
Yes.
surreal feeling. It's got like the snare hitting in the background, the strings and the horns just coming up, and it's I don't know. Surreal was the best way I could come up with how to kind of describe it.
Describe. Yeah.
But it's I don't know. I don't know if this is from J. Cole's perspective or from James's perspective, because if James was speaking on having larger ambitions, then this could definitely fit into that storyline as well. But I saw it as J. Cole himself speaking in this song, talking about how he's made it, but he can't get out of that mentality that he had to be in back
Yeah.
then. But I mean, I
And
guess it could work either way for either of them.
yeah, and I feel like that applies to a lot of the songs on this album that I kind of noted in my album wrap up, but I'll go ahead and get into it now. A lot of these songs I'm going to say are written from James's perspective, but they're from J. Cole's perspective of James's perspective, and a lot of times there's a lot of similarities being drawn between J. Cole and James, because I mean they're very similar people. They were friends, they had a lot in common. So it makes sense that these songs kind of come from the perspective of both.
Yeah.
And it makes even more sense from, I think it was. Well, we'll get to it when we get to it. There was a song later that kind of drives home that theory, in my opinion.
I think I might
But
know what
yeah,
it is. I'm gonna play the guessing game.
lyrically though, like you said, I got it from James' perspective of him realizing he's going to die if he keeps living this way, but he feels that he's in too deep and he can't just give up everything that he's worked for. He's in it, and he can't just get out,
Yeah.
kind of a deal. And to kind of reinforce that, well, maybe not reinforce that per se. Throughout the song, there are two samples of a little girl talking about her dad. Presumably, she's talking about James.
Hmm.
Dying and how she's dealing with it. And she says that like when she gets mad, she goes in her room and slams the door or whatever, and says that she wishes her dad was there. Which
Yeah.
I thought was kind of an interesting perspective. It was an interesting choice to include her perspective
Yeah.
in this album. I don't know if it was actually James's daughter, but it seemed to me that it was meant to be James's daughter at the very least.
Given the whole canon of this album, I'd say that fits. Just because I don't know, it seemed like, and this is me. I don't know. Maybe I'm not digging too far into it, but I think I might just be wrong. But it's what jumped out at me at first because she she's like, whenever my mom tells me to clean my room, or I go in my room and slam the door and say, and then J. Cole
It
comes in
cuts
with
into
his,
it
and
comes into
he's like,
the
spit
next
on my
part.
name, never, like going like
Dirt on
that,
my name, never.
yeah, and he's going like back to the mentality, like the Ville mentality, and that kind of makes me think that it is James's daughter because they're talking about the way that he felt like he was being real, he was being a man, and that seems like
Right.
keeping up with your reputation in that area, like just living through her, maybe. But
Yeah.
that's I don't know, man.
Yeah, and again, it could very much be from J. Cole's perspective as easily as it could be from James's perspective. And it was the next track that kind of drives that home. The next track being She's Mine,
Hmm.
part one of a two-parter. Get strap in, folks. Part two doesn't come till later. but this is part one. It's overall a very lovely sounding track. It's got some nice groovy sounding bass again, some light keys, but these strings that kind of come in on the chorus just fucking sell it for me.
Yeah,
Um, Lyrically, it's a love song, and I think this could also be from J. Cole's perspective or James's perspective or both. And the reason I think that more so on this track is because there are a lot of layered vocals happening here that could represent both of them speaking. And the lyrics in the outro specifically, he says she gets him, and then you hear someone else going, "You get me," or it's him, but it
yeah,
sounds like it's coming from a different person. She hugs him, "You kiss me." So I think that's J. Cole being aware of it and using it as a vehicle to both tell James a story and how he was feeling, but also personally how he feels about his wife.
definitely, because that's something that I thought it was just him talking until the whole blew the lid off the whole operation thing happened, where I figured out he wasn't talking from his own perspective. But
Right.
it seems as though he almost has to be talking personally as well as telling a story.
Yeah, it's a very intimate song,
Yeah.
and it's
Which,
very lovely. It's a love song, but
yeah,
like it's one that like it has soul to it, I
it
think, which doesn't happen a lot in love songs.
definitely, and the way it's so, he must just be an amazing writer,
Yeah.
especially if this is not at all from his perspective, because he's talking like the things that he says where he's talking about just wanting to open up about his childhood to somebody, wanting to be able to talk to
Tear down
them,
those walls.
yeah, tear
Yeah.
down those walls without, to me, thinking about it, like he wants it without the fear of having to be judged by somebody,
Yeah.
and he feels close enough that he could do that. And on a separate thing, talking about the whole being a man, being real
Yeah.
debacle, is he's wanting to not have, he's he's attracted to the fact that he may not have to feel that fear, and thinking he's flirting with the idea of changing his perspective on what being real means in this song.
Yeah.
think.
Especially because in the previous track, from my perspective, it was James coming to terms saying, look, if I keep living this way, I'm going to die, but that's just how it's got to be. And then you
Yeah.
come into this track where he's like, wait a minute, I don't want to die anymore because this woman's a fucking amazing woman.
Yeah.
And I want to live just for her.
But it's only part one.
It's only part one. You got to stay tuned for part two, folks.
Oh my god. Oh shit. But speaking of changing perspectives,
Yes.
the next song, Changes, is
Change.
just. Is it just Change?
I think it's just Change.
Man.
It's fine.
Okay. Well, Changes is a Black Sabbath song. Look it up. We'll do a review of it at some point.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Change and or Changes. Man, I once again am in love with the music on this song. And
it's got a
just
good old school feel to it. The music does. I love it.
Yeah. And it's like paired with the messages in the song, it just makes it perfect for me. Really. I'm not perfect, maybe too strong of a word, but I really, 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 really like this song.
Yeah, and it's called Changes or Change, and it starts upbeat and has kind of like a good groove to it. And the music kind of gets more somber towards the end because this is the track where I kind of mentioned back in track 2, Immortal, where James is killed at this point in the story, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, the drums kind of drop out and leave just the bass and some keys, and you hear like a news reporter mention the shooting, and then the beginning of the eulogy, like I mentioned, and the song kind of like it rides out in a very respectful way, I think. But so the first verse, in my opinion, seemed like it was coming from J. Cole's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more optimistic. And maybe this was just James because he had that kind of change of heart in She's Mine Part 1. But it's saying that life's going to get better. You're at peace with that. He's not afraid to die anymore. He's meditating and looking inward. And that's the only real way to change. And then verse 2, it in my theory, it shifted back to James's perspective because there's kind of a dissonance happening in this song, which makes me think it's swapping perspectives. But in verse 2, he talks about wanting to get rich quickly and selling drugs despite having a baby on the way.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes back to J. Cole's perspective, seeing the rest of the story play out, I guess.
Man, this album was so well written that I keep wanting to reference forward to songs because it's all such an interwoven story.
Yeah, it ties together so well.
But yeah, you saying there being the dissonance of him wanting to go back to selling drugs because he has a baby on the way fits in with something in a later song where they're talking about having a job, hitting a time card is the slow money because you're wanting to just be out there grabbing a wallet. You want to be out there getting money now, and it's the allure, I guess, of that life to people is you can just get the money now, which
and once you've been doing that for so long, it's got to be hard to change.
Yeah, but hey, the song's called Change, so
indeed. I thought it was interesting because I think it's the last verse. J. Cole seems to be kind of criticizing that perception in his community where you aren't a man or you aren't real unless you have a gun. And guns are used to settle everything, even stuff that's super fucking petty.
Yeah.
And he says at one point, I call it poison, you call it real.
Yeah.
So J. Cole's clearly like sick of this shit and thinks that change, maybe that's a deeper thing that I just hit. He says the only real change comes from inside. Maybe he was speaking not only as a person but as a community, saying that like if you guys are going to keep acting this way, like nothing's going to change.
Oh shit, because even the sermon, like that sermon is things have got to change, we've got to do better, we can't let this happen. So yeah, I think there's
kind of an extra layer that I just cracked open.
I like it.
But yeah, the song culminates in the shooting of James. Everyone scatters. He sees that somebody has fallen, and he can't really see who it is because he's trying to get out of the scene, right? He's trying to get home. He gets home the next day. He sees it on the news that it was James, and that's the point where Immortal was potentially referencing. I'm going to say it references because I just like that theory.
I like it too. It's one of those good ones where you're like, it has to make sense.
Yeah, it's too good not to be true. And if it wasn't intended, J. Cole should say that it was intended.
Exactly.
It's cool.
Just take the credit.
Take the credit. The next track on the album is Neighbors. It's got a bit of a slower beat, but it's still traditional rap. I keep saying traditional rap. It's modern rap musically for the most part. In something that I looked up for you specifically, well, I didn't look it up for you, but I found and I included it in my notes for you specifically because of what we mentioned last week. The music is actually a different track, somebody else's track that is played in reverse. And that track is Forbidden Fruit by Elite, which is someone else on J. Cole's label that actually helped produce this album. It's one of his tracks that's just played backwards, which I thought was interesting.
That's it, because I love the music on this track. Like,
yeah.
that makes sense because the chorus specifically sounds kind of like eerie and spooky, I guess. But this is one of my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, I really like the song a lot too. Are we going to play the guessing game on what our favorite? I think we probably have the same favorite song.
I think we do, and I think. Well, I'll go ahead and give you this. I think I have too many possible favorite songs coming up for you to not guess them all.
I mean, there's only 3 after this, Joey.
So it might be all of them.
It might be all of them.
But just the message in the song, talking about finally getting away from it all. You're finally escaping. You did it. You got one of the 3 ways out of there. He became famous, and you get out of there, and you end up in this new place, this fancy ass whatever.
Yeah, you got a house on the lake.
Yeah, and you escaped that violence, but you can't escape the prejudice that you're moving into. Talking about all the neighbors think I'm selling dope. And he talks about like getting to this new house, and he's just sitting there, and oh shit, the cops are at the door.
Right, and they're fucking busting in with like assault rifles and shit. Like, interestingly, this was told from a real experience that J. Cole had.
Really?
With neighbors assuming that he was selling drugs, that ended up with the police raiding his house and not finding any evidence of it. But yeah, he uses it. That's another reason why I think he weaves the perspective of James and himself, is because he's talking from a very real place that is also a very real place that James was.
Yeah, because this song also made me think that it had to be him writing about it. Yeah, because one of the lines is like, even when the president's jamming your tape, like, and this shit still happens to him. It's like, oh fuck, like there's no escape. There is literally, you can be the literal president of the United States, can be like just loving your music. That
prejudice still exists.
Yeah,
which is fucking insane. But I mean, I guess it doesn't excuse you from being a shitty person just because the president listens to your tape.
Yeah, but to be falsely
that well known,
and
to just be falsely accused for being black. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the song ends with him saying he's moving back to Southside, and that he should have never come here to white man territory, because the shit isn't any better here. So he kind of wants to go back because nothing's changed really.
Yeah, that song made me mad the first time I listened to it.
It's good that you're upset by it. Like, you should be upset by it, and that's the point of him kind of talking about it in the way that he does. Is it's frustrating.
Man, the place where we live is not at all racially diverse. So like,
we are a white man country.
Yeah, and because I know that this exact stuff happens.
Yeah.
Like, around us. It's not like, oh yeah, that doesn't that only happens in the deep south. That only happens there. It's like, no,
it happens everywhere.
It's just a thing that happens, and people. Okay.
Racism is bad, people.
Take it from us.
We're professionals.
God damn it.
Take us away from this angry place, Joey.
Okay. Full close. It's actually a pretty nice song.
It's a very lovely song.
It's a song about just wanting to do the right things for a person that you love. Just simple things like folding the clothes to make their day easier, being so happy and so far away from this fake manliness, the fake
Yeah.
realness that you're drinking almond milk. You never thought you'd drink almond milk. Like,
Yeah, I
you,
love it. It's a funny contrast to the
yeah,
rest of the album being so like serious that you kind of peel it back and you say like, fuck it. Like I love you so much. I'm just gonna fold clothes. I want your life to be easy because you make my life easy. And if that means I gotta fold clothes, fuck it, I'll do it. If it means I
yeah.
gotta drink almond milk, so be it. I'll drink that fucking almond milk.
And I'll be happy doing it
Yeah,
because I don't care. Like, I'm not worried about putting on this front of like, oh well, he's doing this, he's doing that. That's not a real man. That's not
right.
whatever.
There's that perception of real again, right, leaking back in. So
Mm.
I think this is another track that I think is from J. Cole's perspective for sure, talking about his wife, but also I think it could call back to the happier times that James had before he was killed. He said he found that woman, right?
Yeah,
And if She's Mine Part 1 is from his perspective as well, then like he found his soulmate for whatever that means. So
yeah,
this could be another kind of throwing back to that and getting over the down parts, maybe looking back and not necessarily repressing the fact that he's in a shitty neighborhood now with white people that call the cops on him, but
yeah.
like
But
it's
getting
it's a lovely track.
yeah, it's a very nice palate cleanser, I guess.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
oh, and whenever I don't know if it comes in the first verse, but in the second verse, there's a fucking groovy ass bass line
Yes, I
behind.
love it.
Oh man,
And
uh,
there's some funk guitar in it. There's some real nice drums and some like layered vocals giving kind of a choir effect. I love it.
so if nothing else, listen to it for the groovy bass line.
Yeah, I mean, listen to this album just for the music. If you
Yeah,
don't like the lyrical content, it's a good musical album. The next part of She's Mine is up next. She's Mine Part 2, track 9. It has the same chorus as Part 1, and it has the same general chord progression as Part 1, but it mixes some things up and gives a fresh take, so he's not just reusing the same track, I think.
yeah,
Unlike Part 1, I feel like this one is strictly from J. Cole's perspective instead of the shared perspective that was in Part 2. But it kind of also fits the story of James having a daughter on the way. This one just feels more intimate, like you said, Part 1 did.
yeah. And it's nuts because I looked it up, and I mean, J. Cole's a very private person apparently.
Yeah,
Like he didn't even reveal that he got married until way after the fact, and didn't. Apparently, he only has a son. I guess that people know about. So that because I looked it up once I found out the whole extra story from James's perspective about his daughter, and I
right.
was like, does J. Cole also have a daughter? Because there's no way that this song isn't personal for him. I mean, of
Yeah,
course, if it was about a friend who had a daughter, of course it's personal for him. But
right.
like,
But like in the background, you can hear his child like crying and babbling and stuff
yeah,
in the
and the
background, which I think is a
heartbeat at
nice
some
touch.
point you can
Yeah,
hear just a heartbeat in like woven into the music in the back.
yeah.
And
And this is Part 2 of She's Mine. The first one, I don't have the lyrics for the chorus here. Let me do that real quick. But he's talking about being so in love. He's fallen in love for the first time. He says that in Part 1, and then he comes to Part 2 where he's had a child, and he's like, no, like this is it.
yeah,
This is what love is. This is the truest love that I could ever feel. And I don't have a kid. You have a kid, so I don't know how I can't talk from that place. But this song is very endearing, even though I'm not generally a happy song guy, and B, I'm not a parent, and I don't have that feeling towards a child.
yeah. This song, honestly, like as a person who has a daughter, is pretty spot on. Like at one point, he talks about like not feeling worthy of what has been given to him. He talks
Yeah,
about wanting to shield her from all of the evil in the world, but not even knowing if he should because he goes into this thing about Santa Claus where he's like, because that would mean Santa Claus wouldn't exist, and
right.
because Santa Claus represents the greed from the corporations, and so the
Yeah,
uncertainty and the confusion of your own morals on how to raise a child. It's I don't. It's a very intense song, and the way it ends with him I don't know the exact lyrics, but where he's talking about, I want to cry, I don't even want to fight it. Going back
Yeah,
to that, he's not scared of what he's being perceived as anymore. He's just living his life for the people that he loves,
right.
which,
And I think it's, and this kind of goes on the next track a little bit, but I think that that's him from his perspective, in a way, criticizing James's perspective and saying that this is what makes someone real. This is the moment. This is what makes a man, being able
yeah,
to set aside all of those, judgments from friends and family and whatever, and just enjoying it and being so fucking happy that you're crying
yeah.
because it's what true love is.
And this is like, because he's saying all this, and it's sounding like great. He's saying that he doesn't want to die anymore now that his daughter's here. He's never felt so alive, but it's
Right.
all over this like super slow and somber.
It's so lovely.
It's like, and it's almost like bittersweet because you're
Yeah.
like, you can tell he's happy, but then you think back to the song where you know that like he got back into it whenever he had a baby on the way, and so
Yep.
you think back to him dying in the song, and like, I don't know if it's the last lyric, but like the I've never felt so alive, thinking about the fact that he was killed, and then the next track comes in, and it's like, fuck, man, like,
Go for it.
okay, for your eyes only. I'm just gonna skip right to the part that I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's revealed that all of this was like a tape to be played for James's daughter upon his death,
Yeah.
to explain to her, like, I guess show her the life and the trappings and the evil that is within this way of life, this way of thinking, and that it's got to change, and the hearkening back to the change can only come from the inside, trying
Yeah.
to instill that thought into his daughter's head, like, that no, this is what life's about. Life is about loving the people that care for you, that caring for the people that you love, and
Yeah.
loving your daughter. Like, you were real. I think, was it the last line was, you were real, you weren't real, you were real because you loved your daughter, I think, is
Right,
the
and that's kind
last
of
line.
what I was saying in the last track as well. Is hey, this is a long ass song. This is the
Yeah,
longest song on the
it's like eight
album.
and a
It's
half
like,
minutes.
yeah, it's pretty long. But the reason it's so long is because there are four different verses. The first three are from James's perspective, talking to his newborn daughter, explaining that, like, look, I'm gonna die. This is and kind of sharing that this is the life he's had and the life that he wants her to have, being so different or whatever. And then the fourth verse is J. Cole talking to Nina, who is the character that is James's daughter. And like you said, it's so weird because in the J. Cole verse, he says that James called him, and it was very eerie. And James was freaking out, saying that he somehow knew he was going to die soon, and that he
Yeah,
had been having these visions or whatever. And the to quote the song that was quoting James, it was J. Cole talking to Nina, quoting James, which is kind of convoluted to follow. But he says, "With that said, the only thing I'm proud to say, I was a father. Write my story down, and if I pass, go play it for my daughter when she's ready." And that line and this whole song, again, like you said, blows open the whole thing.
yeah.
That this album is his story. This is the story of James that he asked J. Cole, even though he'd never asked anything of J. Cole before. He's saying, if anything else, I need you to tell this story to my daughter.
Oh man,
It's so good.
it is. It's like if an album could have a twist ending. Like, I guess it's
Yeah.
just. Which, I mean, maybe if I was more perceptive, I would have picked up on all of this throughout, like, the
Right.
whole album. But
I mean, it's
yeah,
pretty subtle in most of the other tracks. But especially if you didn't know J. Cole, and because a lot of it is kind of typical, like what you would expect a rapper, going back to kind of that prejudice, like you had an assumption that it was from him because he's a black rapper,
yeah,
right? So you kind of assumed that he had a rough life, and he did. Like I said, the story is about him as much as it is for James, I think. But yeah, it's real nice. It's a good way to end the album. it,
definitely.
it kind of it gives you a new spin on it, a new perspective on it, and then he kind of J. Cole, and I think towards the end of his verse, that's from his perspective kind of goes through all of the reasons that James thought he was quote unquote real or a real man, and saying no, he wasn't real because of that. He was real because he loved you.
Yeah.
Which is it's deep, and it hurts me in a good way that, like, even though I don't have a daughter, I don't have someone like that, I don't have a child, that still, like, it nails that feeling, I think, in such a way that you don't have to.
Yeah. I don't know. Once again, I can't speak to that life,
Right.
but I will say, with the minimal amount of pressure that I have had in my life to act a certain way, to be a certain way, I feel like I've done a decent job throughout my life of not caring about other people's expectations, but
Yeah,
it seeps in there, you know?
for
And
sure.
then you have a daughter and you're like supposed to be doing all these quote unquote girly things or whatever, or just showing emotion to a child, or just making silly faces and funny voices and reading books in a public place. And there's just so much stuff that you have to kind of get past
Yeah.
your normal embarrassment. Like, I'm sure mothers go through this as well, because I mean, just social cues are such a hard thing to
Yes.
get out of your head. But like,
100%.
just speaking from my own like experience as a guy, it's like that first time you read a book in the doctor's office waiting room, and you're like, oh shit, everybody's like,
Everyone's looking at you.
everyone's looking at me, and it's like, I can only imagine how it would feel for somebody to be brought up in an environment where people are just being killed. Like,
Yeah.
that's just a thing that happens.
Yeah.
And
Especially at the age of 22. Like,
yeah,
that's fucking young. We're both years older than that at this
yeah,
point.
I, I, it's, and for it to be instilled in you that that's maybe not normal, but it's par for the course, where you
Yeah.
like, and to not show your emotions about it, and to not feel, not even to not show, to not feel it, but to to have that driven into you, and then to have to cope with the emotions, because it changes you, as
Yeah.
literally everybody says, to have a kid, it's a love that you, man,
You can't even think about until it happens.
yeah, exactly, because before I had a kid, it was like I couldn't see the benefit of
Right.
people having kids, because I was like, everybody says it's this love you can't describe, and it's like, I love plenty of people in my life, but does that mean, like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would want to care for a baby version of them the way you have to care for a baby, and then you have a baby, and it's like, okay, I get
It
it.
all makes sense.
I get it now. But
Fascinating.
it's just, I know it's cliche, but like,
No, I mean,
I
cliches exist for a reason, right?
that's very true. But I couldn't imagine having to live that sort of life with that sort of upbringing, and then reconcile your feelings about having a child, having to deal with what you are out there doing, what people who you care about are out there doing, I
Yeah.
guess, and then try to raise a kid in that.
Yeah. It's something, man. Overall, this album is great. Obviously, I think so. I put it on this list. You seem to think so as well, and I'm glad
Yeah,
that I've introduced this to you.
I'm glad you have too, because now I think I'm going to listen to other things by J. Cole and actually give him a shot, because all I knew.
Yeah, I would recommend following this up with KOD, which is the next album after this. I
Okay.
honestly still haven't gone back into his older albums because, like you said, it's very much a specific type of music that I don't necessarily enjoy. But maybe I will as well at some point. I'm just not ready for that in my journey. I don't think.
Oh man, but yeah, you're right. You done good. You done good,
Woo!
Jeremy.
It's one for
I'm
me.
gonna
Put that on
listen.
my chalkboard.
You done more than I did. So
I don't know about that. I've been thinking back on some albums. I think I'm ready to give some of them another shot, and
if it's
not
not a
another
Grizzle, I'll be
shot,
so
but
happy.
I mean,
I know it's
I mean, I have had those songs stuck in my head, but that's for a discussion outside of this podcast.
Okay.
We'll talk about that after.
Next album that we're doing.
The next week, we're listening to the album Mourn by Corbin. Did I say that correctly?
You did. I think you did. You said it the way that I say it, so I'm guessing you're right.
It's the only one that matters. Give me. This is another hip hop album, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's not rap really. It's definitely like hip hop. Corbin himself is I think he's more of like a producer, or like he makes beats and stuff for other people in his like rap collective. I don't actually know their names because I haven't bothered to listen to any of the rest of them, which I mean I should. But Corbin also goes by the name Spooky Black. He had a few other albums like that, and he's credited on other people's albums that way, just in case you want to look at other things by him. But
interesting.
It's very like dark, I guess. Not dark in like the sense of it deals with there's some heavier topics, but it's not like dark in the way that like this album was dark. But there's
like musically is it like kind of like gothic stuff?
Yes, musically it is a very dark album.
Cool. I mean, it's called Mourn. It makes sense.
Yeah. But I really like it. I mean, obviously I put it on there. But yeah.
Hopefully I will as well.
I hope you do, because
I'm excited. I'm ready for it. I've been in this J. Cole groove. You know, I'm feeling it.
Well, with how rainy it's been.
Yeah, that's true.
I've actually listened to this album outside of all of this.
Hell yeah. So,
but yeah.
Cool. Well, until next week, you guys can hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you want to contact us, we'll reply. I mean, we have nothing better to do.
I have literally nothing to do. I'm off this whole week.
Oh yeah, it must be nice, Joey. You can find our podcasts on YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google, just everywhere. We're everywhere at this point. Everywhere we can be, I think. So check us out. Search Feedback Loop on any of those platforms. I'm sure you'll find us. We have enough content at this point that we should be getting picked up.
Yeah, hopefully. Wait, continuity error. I said I'm off this whole week. I'm off the week we're recording this. The week you're listening to it.
It doesn't matter. We're 5 weeks behind anyway. Now, how's that for continuity? Anyways. It's good. They know it. All 10 of our listeners. Until next week, I guess. Stay in our feedback loop.
Bye.